It's nice to be back. And I think this morning, Lily, we have got so much that we would like to cover that there's no way we can possibly cover it. But we wanted to start, I mean, Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think that made us very aware of the Native peoples in this country. And so we wanted to start today by acknowledging the peoples that are here. And I'm going to start just with a formal acknowledgement of the people of the Seattle area. We live on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people. We mourn the harm that has been done to all Native people and their cultures, especially to the many Native children in residential schools. The Duwamish, all 600 of them, are still here, and we continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. I honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish people who still live amongst us.
Amen. And in Tennessee, we have had 7 tribes be a part of Tennessee: the Creek, the Yukai, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, the Shawnee, and the Seneca. And the thing that I learned this week, in Tennessee has been a state for a long time. And in 1763, before America was America, the land that's Tennessee now, the state of Tennessee, was reserved for all First Nations people. And sadly, that didn't last very long. But the beautiful thing that I also learned was that there's not a First Nations tribe that lived where I live. That was a place that everybody shared. And I love that wonderful picture of that, because the animals were prevalent and we're on a river, a couple of rivers, and because there was a salt lick, this is the hunting ground that everybody shared. And lovely. So I think that's a beautiful picture that I wish we could reclaim in Tennessee, of being more about sharing and less about this is mine and that's yours.
Well, and it's beautiful. And, I mean, I'm very aware of the fact that just saying this acknowledgement is a really small thing. There's no action involved in it. But I'm hoping that as we do this every time we use this every time we do a Facebook Live session, that it really will not only raise our awareness, but it will bring us to action for the Native peoples that have been in this land and that are still amongst us.
Well, I'm learning, and I think just learning where you live and who has lived here first is a big thing, because yes. I realized I taught when Hudson, our second son, was in 7th grade. I homeschooled him, and we had a great series of U.S. history books, and his U.S. history books talked about all the First Nations people that were here. And my history books as a kid, we didn't know. I knew about the Trail of Tears because that came from Nashville, and from Andrew Jackson, who was president, and he's from Nashville. So I knew just a little bit about that. I didn't know the horrificness of that until much later in my life. So I think finding out more of the history of where you live is always a good thing, both with First Nations people and with the racist past of where we've lived as well. And having lived in the Northwest, that because the First Nations people are there still, you get a whole different sense than when you live here, because it's been, quote, white for so long.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm sure. And of course, I'm on a steep learning curve with all of this, because this is not my country of birth. But of course, and there is a world international Indigenous Peoples Day, which is different from Indigenous Peoples Day for the US. So don't get confused about those. And of course, on that day, they're increasingly celebrating or acknowledging and trying to bring action for the Native peoples in so many countries who have suffered in the same kind of ways. And it's, I mean, obviously it's the victor that, takes over in a country. And so many peoples have been, I mean, some totally lost, but in every part of the world, others that are still present amongst us that are hardly recognized. I mean, in Australia, Aborigines didn't get the vote well, I don't think they were actually acknowledged as people until in the 60s, you know.
Wow.
And of course the whole, I mean, Tom and I facilitated an Aboriginal conference number of years ago now, which in many ways was my first exposure to these issues in my own country. And oh wow, I mean, I spent half the conference in tears, you know, learning about the stolen children, the lost generation, that, you know, hearing them grieve for the fact that they don't even know where they come from, many of them. And, you know, the same kind of issues with the residential schools that are still coming up. I mean, all kinds of horrific things that have been done to Native peoples all over the world. I mean, the same, we've been watching series about the UK and, you know, what was done to the Scots and to the Welsh and to the Irish, you know, as the English kind of moved out and took over. I mean, it's the same kind of dynamics. And I think the land cries out in these places for the people that God had planted in them, you know. And so we need to be sensitive not only to acknowledging the past, but what can we do? What should we be doing to bring about change in this? And in a way, this kind of leads into some of what we thought we would talk about this morning. We kind of going to get a little sidetracked here, because after I announced in our email yesterday that we were going to focus on finding the balance between planning ahead for Advent and living in the present moment, I was pointed to an article called, let me look at the name here, The Geography of Sorrow, in the magazine, The Sun magazine. And I read this and it was like, wow. And basically what he talks about in it is holding sorrow in one hand and gratitude in the other. And of course, we're in what we're calling our season of gratitude. But I thought this was such an important perspective, and particularly as many of us are in a season of grief because of COVID, because of all kinds of things, and then added to by things like our, you know, growing knowledge of Indigenous Peoples Days and other kind of days of tribute like this as well. We think, how can we show gratitude? And this is a powerful article. So I sent it on to Lily, and it's like the lights went on. I know.
Oh yeah, it was a total gift from Jesus. I love it when you know, it's the phrase of when the student is ready, the teacher shows up. And that was how it was yesterday. I met with my spiritual director, and I have been really suffering with a lot of depression, and I'm an extroverted 7 on the Enneagram. So I smile all the time, and a lot of people don't know that I've suffered with depression most of my life, not the kind that sent me in the hospital gratefully, but take meds for that. But it's just the layers of things that have built up in my life in the last, you know, 12 to 24 months, just kind of have come to a head. And so this article, so my spiritual director was talking about, you know, I think it's more than depression. She used the word grief. And I was like, oh, and then after I had met with her, then Christine had sent that article earlier. And so I read through the article and I was like, that's it. It was the aha of, yeah, I need to process the grief with ritual, because he talks about how we don't know how to do that in Western culture, that we keep our emotions inside. We don't let them out. And if you know the Enneagram, 7 people, we don't want to live in the present. We want to run ahead. We don't like grief. We don't like suffering of any kind. And we try to figure everything out in the brain. So it's all thinking. And so my husband said last week, he goes, I think your problem is that you're trying to solve all this stuff in your brain that's not solvable. And so your brain is like totally exhausted from trying to overthink everything. And I hate crying, Christy. Crying. Some people, you know, drop the head.
8s don't cry either.
No, 8. So yeah. So I have good friends who are like, you know, they cry at commercials, they cry at the drop of a hat. And I just don't do that. But the problem is when you hold it all in for so long, it doesn't have a place to go. That's why people get ulcers. That's why people get sick, but for me, it was like, okay, the floodgates opened in the last couple of days, and I just spent a lot of time Monday, Tuesday crying. So this article though gave me hope that, we need to have ways to process our grief and also acknowledge that it's there. And I think that's one of the things that has been frustrating to me about where we are as a country and maybe as a globe, that we just want to run ahead of run ahead into the new, let's go back to normal, whatever normal looks like, and not acknowledge that we've had this season of just suffering and heartbreak and grief in so many, not just COVID, but lots of, like you said, lots of layers of it. And COVID, but the acknowledgement that, close to 700,000 people have died. And, we have had a little bit of that, but not, as communities.
Yeah. We haven't, as you said, we haven't designed rituals about it. Now, the quote that really struck me is, "The work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched large by them." And I need to go back through the article and read it in more detail and to process it and think, what does this mean for me? Because I think that it's so true. But for me, the key is that, as you said, the development of ritual. And I think, again, this does play into what we thought we'd be talking about, because, as I was reflecting on it this morning and thinking, what helps me to find the balance between planning ahead? Because like you, I live in the future. I'm always planning for the next thing, as Lily knows, because I'm always, okay, Lily, what do we need to do or what's the next thing we're going to do together? Or,
Which is great, because I need that help of kick me in the pants, get me going.
Which is great, because we've got to plan ahead, but we really do lose stand in the possibility of losing our connection to the present moment and the importance of that, because we are in this season of gratitude. And so I was thinking, what are the things that really kind of help me to find that balance? And let me give my 2 cents worth, and then Lily, you can say, because it's ritual, getting up in the morning, continuing to use my mantra, thank you, God, for the gift of life, this wondrous gift so freely given, that really helps to root me. And then creative things. I've been collecting leaves this week and pressing them. So I said to the person whose turn it is to do the meal for our community meal on Monday night, I said, can we paint leaves? Because everybody had said they wanted to. And the painting of leaves is, we paint designs and we put words of gratitude and things like that on them, cover them in Mod Podge, and then they can be the decorations on our tables for the next couple of months, which really, again, helps to focus us. I love doing that. And I think, I was thinking of some of the things we talked about in the online retreat, gearing up for a season of gratitude. And I think, kind of revisiting those, or for those of you that haven't kind of signed up, you can still get the retreat online. It's a really valuable thing to do at this season, to have those kinds of things, take retreat days that help focus. I think that's the other thing that helps me, but these things that help plant me in the present moment, I've just been so important for me.
That's good.
Well, continuing to plan.
Well, so I started
about Advent, and just swimming in Advent at times in a wonderful, wonderful way.
Well, I'm still not there. So I love that Christine is in the Northwest, and I lived there for 2 different times in my life, and I love the Northwest. And she's got on her cute sweater, and I am in, summer garb because it was like 80 yesterday. It is starting to be cooler, so that's nice. That helps. Seasons changing helps me a lot. But I still have my summer centerpiece I've got fall on one side of my house and summer centerpiece. I just started taking it apart from our retreat in the summer. But I think what helps me to stay grounded, I started doing a class. Julia Cameron has a new book on listening. And so I've gotten back to writing morning pages. And
Yeah,
I
you
want
kept just telling me about that. So guess what? I got it.
Oh, wow. Well, so it's a good book. I won't say it's not as great as The Artist's Way. I'll say that, but it has gotten me doing morning pages. So points for that. And it's gotten me to go out and start doing artist states. I think we might've talked about this last time, but the morning pages have been really, because journaling for me, I used to be a great journaler and then I got away from it, but the morning pages are stream of consciousness. So you can say, sometimes I'm writing to God, sometimes I'm just emoting, sometimes I'm just ranting. I've gotten some really amazing ideas from I'm like, oh yeah. So I started like having some new ideas. That was positive. Lighting a candle in the morning. I know you do that too. Christine has, bringing the light of the world into my space. That's valuable for me, grounding. And then taking a walk. Taking a walk outside, even if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just getting out of wherever space I'm in. And for, me having my work that used to take me away doesn't take me away anymore. So I'm a lot at home. So I'm trying to get out more into the neighborhood, but also out into, other things outside of myself. And so and I've also made a commitment to, start calling people and who I haven't touched base with in a long time, or texting them to set up a phone call. And that's helping me stay grounded in the moment. Because I have a lot of friends, sadly, who have cancer right now. And what I keep saying and reminding them, having survived cancer myself, is like, okay, we only get today. Today is the gift. So receive and open the gift of today. And if it's a test, just got a test, that was the picture of today. It doesn't mean it's going to be the same tomorrow. And that's helpful to me to remind myself, is that, okay, today's the gift we get to open. And what does that mean? What is it? Now I fail tons. I fail tons on that one, that I get really, oh crap, this day is just don't care. So there are lots of days that are just, they don't care, or I don't get stuff done and then I feel bad or whatever, but it's the helping remind ourselves that today is the gift we get to open. And it's the only one, that's what Jesus says. It's like, tomorrow will take care of itself. Work, just be present in the moment. And
so important, I think. I agree. And, one of the things I find with getting out and going for a walk, that's the advantage of having dogs. They kind of, in a way, force you to get out and go for a walk, which is great. It's so important. But it also makes you aware as you walk around, the trees and everything are the same, but never the same. Every day they're a little bit different. Every day there are some new things you can notice, and some old things that have disappeared, and that kind of constant change in the seasons, I think too, or in the garden, or in the, in nature around us, is a reminder that if we don't live in this moment, we miss it.
Yeah. And even little things of, for me, you already know this, but God talks to me through lots of things, like the birds and nature, and there've been lots and lots of butterflies. And that's been really, and it's October. That's so it's like the butterflies are not usually out in October, but because we haven't had a lot of cold weather, they're still flying around. Yeah. So that's been giving me hope that I'm not going to be in the green goo for forever. And that's been giving me lots of hope that, all right, we're going to, resurrection and the new life of butterfly flying around versus being inside the chrysalis in the green goo, which is where I feel like I've been for a while. So I'm happy about that. One flew by just a second ago.
How lovely. Yeah, we get a few butterflies here, but not many. We are getting lots of birds. And the woman who lives upstairs actually knows what the birds are, which has been fun for me, getting to know the names of the birds here, because I still kind of talk about not even living in the present or living in the future, but living in the past. I still live in the presence, or you could say grieve the presence of the birds I grew up with, these great big flashy birds.
Yeah, you have a lot of those in Australia, a lot of fun birds in Australia.
Loads of them, yes. And that's one of the things. Often people will say to me, what do you miss about not living in Australia? And I say, the birds.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. It really is, but having somebody that can help me identify what is here now, it not only kind of helps me not look too far into the future, but also helps me not live in the past, which is of course the other
that's a cool idea. That's a cool idea of a practice to have. I have a bird feeder, and that's I feel like I'm one of the older people in my neighborhood. I could be mom to all the kids, that I call them the kid who live on our hill. But I feed the birds because I like that, and I have access to doing that. But it could be a really good practice if you've never done that, is to start a bird feeder, especially even with that, if you don't have kids, but to have that so that you look, you watch for them, and that you see who comes to the feeder, and you get mad at the squirrels. But it's a practice of, it reminds me of the verse in Luke about, that God takes care of the sparrows, so he's going to take care of me too. And we're so much more than sparrows. And that I love that there's so many different, like you were talking about the variety, that gives me hope too, that, there is so much bigger than all the things that I see. The God creator is so much bigger. And I love it.
The nice thing is we have more birds now than we used to have. And partly because we're more aware of what things we need to have in the garden in order to attract the birds. And more than that, having a lot of birds around is a great excuse not to go around and clean up everything in the garden at the end of the year, because, the seed heads and those dead heads that, people go around and think, oh, I've got to get rid of these. They feel ashamed because they've got them. Or the piles of leaves and things like this. It's like you need some of those, you don't want them clogging the gutters and things like that. But, having piles of leaves where the wildlife in your garden can find shelter during cold days is important. Or the seed heads that provide them with food, really, really important, and we don't think about these things. But again, it's part of living in the present moment. What is it of this present moment that can provide for other creatures in a way as well? That's something important to think about too.
That's what I've done the last couple of years. Well, I don't have a place to grow pumpkins, but I whatever's left of my pumpkin after I have it, I put it over in we have a little garden plot, and I put it over there and just let the squirrels and the birds have at it. We have an abundance of squirrels, and they have a great time.
We do. Yes,
and so they have a great time with the leftover pumpkins. And as a result, one year we did grow some pumpkins because the squirrels left the trail of the seeds, and we had enough to build a 3-tower. Wasn't very many of them, but we had a 3-tower of pumpkins because of the squirrels planted them for me, and that was fun. And the other one year too, we had the bird feeder. That was before the houses were built on either side, but the birds spread out a bird seed, and the sunflowers grew just in random places around our house. And that was such a gift to have, it was just a gift from God to me through the sunflower, since I'm a sunflower fan, that the birds just dropped them around, and there was nobody, to mow down the stems or anything. So they just blossomed all over the side yard, the empty lot next door.
Oh, I love seeing the squirrels in particular on the sunflower heads. Once upon a time I grew them with the hope of, harvesting them. But then I realized we didn't eat them anyway because, I don't like sunflowers when they're in the hull.
Right.
So it was nice to kind of be able to gift them to the squirrels. But I bought a pumpkin yesterday. Let me show you. Where's it, Tan? Now, the irony is that whereas most people look at it and think, oh, what a great pumpkin for decorating, I think, what a wonderful pumpkin for making pumpkin soup out of. You know,
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
These gray ones are very much like the ones that I grow up with. And, you know, very sweet flesh, lovely flesh. And
Oh, interesting. See,
yeah.
those are new. Those are new to me. You know, kind of the ghost pumpkins. The green ones, green gray, and then the white one. And yeah, so that's good. You need to post the recipe for us. That
it is. I've got a couple of pumpkin soup recipes. My favorite one is the pumpkin black bean soup recipe. You know, which is kind of got a Caribbean, and so that's the one I usually make. And it's very good, very nutritious, of course. And it's got, you know, because it's got black beans, and I put pumpkin seeds in it as well.
Wow.
Not with the hulls on, kind of out of the hulls. But yeah, no, so my pumpkin never gets out for display. It just gets kept until I can make soup. So.
That's awesome. So do you roast it in the oven first?
Yes, I do. I roast it in the oven, and then, you know, obviously put it in the blender. And I mean, it's so long since I made it, I can't remember all the ingredients, but I think it's got coconut milk in it, and the black beans, and then spices and things, and as I said, pumpkin seeds as well.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's great.
I really like it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's another great practice for keeping us present is to make food versus just takeout or takeaway, depending on where you live. And that I know all the people who many people during COVID have made bread as a practice. And that wasn't something that I adopted, but I love watching people post their pictures of the breads that they have made and the baking they've done during you know, kind of lockdown seasons. But I think that that process of cooking, making things, even if it's cookies or something, whatever it is, that slows us down and focuses on the moment. And baking, you have to wait for,
Yes.
you know, but the process of cooking homemade things, it can be a practice itself,
Yes.
slowing us down. And then if you do it in community, if you have, you know, family that likes to cook with you, or if you have friends that can cook with you, that's also, you know, kind of focusing on less being together. I know you guys do a community meal in your house community. And I think that's the thing we've missed the most in Thin Place, is we're not meeting around our table right yet.
Yeah. It's huge. It is. Well, and for us, because we grow so much of our own produce too, you know, you've got that seasonal kind of doing of things. Now, at the moment, of course, it can get a little overwhelming because, you know, I've been furiously processing apples.
I saw the picture. I saw the pictures of the apple, like 200 pounds.
I mean, that was the first time we harvested. We've harvested probably another 200 pounds. So we've probably got 400 pounds of apples. And I think from 3 little seeds once upon a time. And this happens every year, you know. So I would say I've made at least 40 quarts of apple cider. I have dried apples. I have, and I haven't yet made a pie. I've made a couple of apple cakes. So the next thing is an apple pie, definitely. Okay. Tom keeps hinting at that, but probably, I don't know how many. I mean, others obviously are processing them too. I don't have to process the whole 400 pounds, thank goodness. But for me, you know, the making of the apple cider has been something that's helped keep me grounded over the last couple of weeks, particularly because of some things I've been struggling with as well. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon, and we'll find out how bad my sinuses are. I'll tell you about that the next time.
Next the report. Well, that we just have, that's back to being present in the day, is that, okay, today, this is what we got. And we can't worry about the next 2 weeks or whatever. We have to enjoy the day of what is the gift of the day. And you know, that's another thing. My practice is to look up, because I don't know who said this long ago, but that we don't naturally look up as people. Some, you know, like nobody checks if it's dusty up the top or if there are cobwebs. You have to actually plan to look up to see those things. And so I practice now looking at clouds because
Lovely.
because clouds change, and that also came from the video that you shared in the gratitude retreat from Brother David, is about the clouds will never be the same as they are right this moment. And so they change all the time, but how wondrous that is. And so we have Christine's been to our house, but we have a house that's on a big hill. And so before they built houses on either side, we have these skinny windows at the top of like our bedroom and our bathroom up on the third floor of our house. And when you look out, you can see the cloud. Like if you're in the shower, you can, even though there's a house next door now, you can still see the clouds up above. And that's one of my things in the shower, is to go, oh, thank you, Jesus, for the beautiful sky or the beautiful clouds that are, you know, up there, and just to notice. And that's a real grounding practice for me, is to take time to notice the little things like the clouds. Or last night I said we had a half cookie moon, because it was a half, you could see the moon and it was the half of the moon. So the half cookie moon last night was really beautiful, and it was just chilly enough. I'm so jealous of Christine and my sister who live in the Pacific Northwest, because they're already in sweater weather, but it was just crisp enough out, not even crisp, it was cool, I will say that, last night, to be outside. And when you walk the dog, you kind of could have a light jacket on, not walk very far, you get sweaty still, but it was like, oh, you could the hint of fall was giving me hope. But to take take the time to notice the things like that. And this morning, because we haven't had any rain, I was watering the begonias that have taken over the summer, you know, during the summer, and just the bright red of these begonias and the luscious green next to them. That's how I know God exists, is the colors of the universe, like scream at me, hey, look, it's a creative.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they've done really well this year. The begonias have just taken off, and last year I had zinnias. I missed the zinnias, but the begonias were a lot less work to take care of and didn't need as much love. But that's another.
My zinnias haven't had any love at all, and they've still kind of given me flowers. So.
Oh, good. That's good. Well, I love that was last year. We don't get a ton of sun. They need a lot of sun, and where they were growing didn't get enough sun, thanks to the houses on either side now. But anyway, plant gardening, you are the gardener, that's one of your practices to keep you grounded, is to get out and dig in the dirt. And even having a little bit of dirt to even just a pot plants is grounding for me. And one of the practices from the Julia Cameron book was to look at the gifts of your ancestors, of the people. She doesn't actually say it that in such a nice way, I don't think, but one of the things of thinking of the Indigenous Peoples Day, and some of my Black friends, they talk about the gifts they've received from their ancestors. And so yes. we made a list in our class that I do on Mondays about the relatives that have already died and the gifts that they gave you.
Oh, lovely.
And so one of my grandfather, Jesse Tritchler, was a florist and a nurseryman. So he grew bushes and trees and planted them in people's yards and did before landscape architecture was a big deal. That's what he did for a living. But I received that from, that I love plants and I love flowers and I love just digging in the dirt. So I was being grateful for Jesse's, DNA on gardening. And that's his whole family. His whole family were nurserymen in the sense of growing plants. And they're still the relatives that are still living today still have the nursery business. The Tritchler brothers, they're landscapers. They're landscapers now instead of nurserymen. They don't call it that. But when I moved on this back to Nashville, and when we finally found the house we live in now, it's on the west side of town, and their nursery was just 2 miles from here, and where my mom grew up. And so when she asked me, they were downsizing and such, and they said, what would you want out of our house? I said, you know what I want? I want the Tritchler nursery sign.
Lovely.
So I have that in our house now. That is the original Tritchler nursery sign from their gardening store. And it's really fun to be, that it's back on its side. To me, it's like, oh, it came full circle. It's back on its side of town where it belonged. And
And it is interesting, you know, I mean, part of what I love about Advent is kind of looking ahead to the things I put up during Advent. And one of those is an icon of the Annunciation that had belonged to an old uncle of my father's who was was an Orthodox priest. And I think, you know, as I've looked at the history of my father's family in particular, there are lots of priests, you know, looking back, there were lots of spiritual people in that. And I think, you know, my heritage of spirituality, I think, has come from that, you know, and some of the images I also have I have a cross. I use that less because it's too big and unwieldy. But this lovely icon of you know, for the Advent season is just very special.
I think we
connections with it, you know.
It's Greek Orthodox history. You have Greek Orthodox history from your Greek heritage. Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really fun to draw from that.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. So, yeah, so that's part of my looking forward to Advent and thinking about the things that I've got and the things that I'd like to be displaying during this season.
But that's also back to, I'll do it both and of the practice of, you know, we talked about learning about the history of where you live now and the peoples who lived here before, but also looking back at your own history and going, where have some of the things that I value now come from?
Yes.
And what are those things that I want to keep going, you know, carry forward, and maybe you don't even know about where those things come from, or what your family, you know, history is, or those kind of things can really help you stay present, but also get excited about, you know, what do I want to learn more about, or go to those places, you know, I've never been to Greece, but that would be a fun place to go on pilgrimage to find out more about have you been to Greece?
Oh, yes, because when I joined the ship, the Anastasis, it was in Greece. So I spent 3 years in Greece.
Oh, very cool.
We actually went and visited the island where my father's family had come from. The island of Kythera. And there are more Kytherians, I think, in Australia now than there are on the island of Kythera, because a lot of them went there.
Wow, that's just great.
Yeah, well, and they've also actually been able to trace the possible history of the family going a lot further back. And one of the things that was brought up as a possibility, not as a definite, but as a possibility, that the name Aroni, which is my maiden name, actually is a rendition of the word Aaron, and that the family had actually originated in, well, they do know that they originated in Jerusalem. They moved to Constantinople, then to the island of Rhodes, and then to the island of Kythera. And, you know, so no idea. Were they thrown out of Jerusalem because they were Christians? You know, who knows? Who knows? And obviously, nobody knows. When we had the DNA tests done, it didn't show that we had Jewish heritage. So it's like, well, maybe this is, you know, one of those myths that kind of has gotten into the family somehow. But, you know, it's fun still. Evidently, they can trace them back to Constantinople.
Wow, that's exciting. That's really fun. That's very fun.
Harder to trace back on the Scottish side because, you know, sometime in the 1800s, a lot of the records were burnt in a fire, and so you can't trace them back. And my grandfather's name, Milne, is such a common name too that it's very hard to trace it back. So anyway, I think, Lily, that we have come to the end of our time here. Some fun stuff, and hopefully that people will take hold of some of these things and think about what does it mean for you to live in the present moment while still kind of doing some planning for the future. But don't get too far ahead of yourself. I know that's one of my problems, is wanting to get too far ahead of myself. But, you know, I mean, and particularly as we're starting to talk about the Advent virtual retreat, Walking in Wonder through Advent, which my husband said to me this yesterday, he said, I love that title. And I said, yeah, and I love that concept. Kind of rediscovering the wonder of Advent, I think, is something that really does grab my attention and my excitement and says, yes, I've got to spend some time looking at the future. So.
Okay, so yesterday, Christine, as we end, I was walking the dog up the big hill and I was looking back down the hill. And we have a new neighbor who lives right at the bottom, and they had a sign, like a neon sign in their upstairs. I don't know if it's their lounge I don't know what room it is, but it was a neon sign. And I'll send you this picture. It says, "In wonder we trust."
Ah!
In neon, and that's new, that because they're new neighbors, so I don't know them yet.
Oh, I love that.
But I was just like, it's a sign. It is a sign, but it is a sign.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That was really,
yeah. Well, as you know, I'm more and more convinced that we have got to re-wonder the world, rediscover the wonder of the world in so many dimensions, in the world around us, but in the biblical world as well. I think we've lost a sense of that wonder. And of course, that's why we're doing the retreat. And we got really excited in our planning last week, didn't we?
Yeah, and so that can be our homework assignment for each other and those folks who are listening on Facebook and other ways. So go out this week and do something that brings you the gift of wonder and Amen. Brings you and actually take some time to think about, what are the things that I need to ground myself today. Maybe you can be like, maybe you notice, like me, you've been spinning around a lot in your head, and that's not being very healthy or helpful. So maybe it's just taking some time off screens and to get outside, or take some time to just journal all the things that are bubbling up inside you, or cook something good, and just enjoy the process, and take some and find the wonder in anything simple, like the clouds or the sunshine or the leaves. Ours aren't falling yet.
Paint some leaves. Yes.
Yeah, paint some leaves. Do something that brings you hope and joy, and instills in you the gift of wonder. And
Amen.
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 Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Lily. And thank you, those that are watching as well. Many blessings on you this day and this week and into the future.
Amen.
Amen.
Have an awesome day.
You too.
Thanks.